Welcome back to the parillaworks channel. My name is John, and this is my newest little side project that I just completed. It is a small outfeed table, assembly table, parts cart, and prototype for a bigger assembly table. And it's made out of extruded aluminum and MDF. This is my first time working with extruded aluminum, and I kind of wanted to venture into that direction because there's a lot of versatility with this type of material. You can order your parts cut to length with specific connectors. They get shipped to your door, and you just sort of assemble them like a Lego or a Erector set. And it's a lot of fun, a little change of pace from having to work with plywood and 2x4s for making your shop furniture. It's not cheap, but it is really versatile. I used 3 different websites to pick out what I wanted. 80/20, Fastech, and t-nutz, and I ended up buying everything from t-nutz, mostly based on cost, though their customer service and website was pretty phenomenal. So I'll kind of share my process for how I picked out what parts I picked out. It's not the be-all end-all of extruded aluminum videos, but I hope to make a better one in the future with a bigger table that'll be my true workstation. So this is sort of just a dry run to kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. So let's get into it. All right, so this is everything. It's not much. This is a pretty small table, and the first thing you'll see here is the aluminum extrusions, and I had these pre-cut. So you have 2 options. You can either order long lengths and cut them yourself, or you can order them pre-cut to your specific lengths. And it's most of the places that you order this stuff, there's going to be like a $2 cut fee per piece, so you just kind of have to figure out the math if it makes sense for you to order an 8-foot long piece and cut it down as opposed to paying $2 per piece. So I figured for my first one, let me just get them all pre-cut and not have to worry about cutting aluminum. So there's various lengths here that'll make up the table. And so let's move on to the corner brackets. These are the corner brackets with the gusset, and they have a little support piece across the length here, I guess the hypotenuse of this bracket. And so these are going to be a little bit more heavy duty compared to these ones right here without the gusset. So I have these set up to go in more high strength areas, and these ones are for the lighter duty areas. And these are all connected with these bolts and t-nutz. So these are 15 series aluminum pieces. So this has a 5/16 bolt and a t-nut here. So this will just slide in to there. And then if I just grab another piece, that would go like that. You tighten them down and you have a joint. So let's move on to that stage of the build and get this thing made. All right, so I have the first assembly that I'm gonna make. This is gonna be the top assembly, and it's made of 5 pieces. These are the 4 outside pieces, and there's a little cross support here. And I have my sketchbook that'll kind of guide me along the way, and I'll just kind of start laying these pieces out. And one thing I'm excited about this style bench is the clamping possibilities for it. So I'm going to have these T-slot style clamps, and they'll just kind of slide in here, and that'll let me clamp something vertically. I know this is not the right orientation of the clamp, but if you can picture this clamping something vertically, that opens up some possibilities for different work holding things. So, and instead of just lining up the long sides on the outside and then these on the inside, and blocking off access to the T-slot, I'm making it so that each end kind of follows the previous one or the next one. So I can access the T-slot here, I can access the T-slot here, I can access it here, and I can access it here. None of the ends are blocked off, and there's no need to route any access points for these clamps. And then this little piece will just kind of go in the middle. And on a table this small, I don't really think this is necessary as far as preventing sag in the MDF top I'll be making, but I figured better safe than sorry. All right, so I have this rough layout here, and now we can start installing these corner brackets and tightening some bolts down. But before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about thinking ahead. So I paid for these economy t-nutz, and the economy ones are obviously the cheapest ones, and they need an endpoint to slide into place. You can't just drop it in place. So if I were to secure these corners and not install these ahead of time, there's no way for me to get them in place. So just make sure you think about that ahead of time. I have this one slid into this. I'll go ahead and finish this one And before that, I also have to install these, which are going to be the hold downs for the MDF top. So I'm going to have, I don't know, 8 or 10 of those just to make sure that the MDF doesn't kind of spring up and it keeps itself nice and flat. So I'll go ahead and get the rest of these installed and start tightening them down. All right, so I have this pretty much roughed out, and I'm making sure all my edges are pretty much flush, which should mean they're square. And I'm pleased to find out that all of these are pretty accurately cut. This 17-inch piece was what I was kind of worried about, if it would kind of line up with the rectangle that I had set up here. So anyways, I'll kind of get started tightening these down. These tabletop fastening brackets, or what I'm dubbing the tabletop fastening ones, don't really have to be fastened right now, but I'll get started with the corner ones. You want to use an Allen wrench that has the little ball at the end. It just kind of makes it easier to access the bolts. Now, I don't know how much torque you're supposed to apply to this. Maybe that's something I should have looked up, but for now I'm not going to apply too much. Just enough that kind of feels right, I guess. So I'm just kind of using my finger here to make sure that it feels flush, and then I'll go ahead and tighten the bolt down. All right, so I have this top assembly pretty much tightened up. Some of the tabletop fastening ones are still loose, but that's not a big deal. The next step is to install 4 legs, which is pretty typical for most tables, having 4 legs. So they're each going to be held with 2 of these corner brackets, and like I mentioned, having the access points available for each and every side is really helpful, because if I didn't have that, I would probably have to put some of these in ahead of time, but I don't. So here we are. So I'll just put those in like that. That'll secure it. I'll bring you in closer to tighten them down. See, that looks pretty wobbly, but once we get it tightened down, it should be pretty strong. So I'm just kind of eyeballing with my finger, which is a thing nowadays, to make sure that this is flush with the end. It's not the biggest deal. I can always unloosen these or untighten them and then unloosen them to fix something. All right, so I have these 4 legs installed, and the next step is to install these cross support pieces. I'm only gonna have two of them, one on each long side. I don't think it needs it on all 4 sides. So these are gonna add some rigidity to the legs, and it's also gonna give me a spot to add a little shelf to put my clutter on. Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. All right, so I just got these cross supports installed, and I used a little spacer block. In this case, it's 8.5 inches tall. This plus the height of my casters that I'll be installing will put this shelf above the dust collection port on my table saw. So I just want to have access to that so that it's not blocked. So that's the reason I chose this height. And it was just as easy as sliding these down onto here and tightening the bolts. So that's it for the extruded aluminum assembly. The final step for this, outside of adding the MDF top and shelf, is tapping the holes and adding the casters. My mom just made mac and cheese, so I gotta go eat dinner, but I'll do that next time I'm in the shop, so I'll see you then. Getting the holes tapped is another service most of the vendors offer, and I really considered paying for it, but after doing it myself, I realized it's not that difficult, and now that I have the correct size tap, I can use it on future projects. Also, I forgot to mention that I am using what is called 15 series extruded aluminum. There are various series. 15 means it's 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. 10 series is 1 inch by 1 inch, and there are also metric series. I considered using 10 series for the cost and weight savings, but I couldn't find decent casters that would fit a 1/4 hole, which is what would need to go in the 10 series legs. For the 15 series, a more common 5/16 by 18 thread is used. Also to note, within the 15 series is a series of weight classes. There is regular, light, and ultralight. Each one uses less material than the previous and can save money and weight if the strength isn't needed. I used a light and was pretty happy with the decision. Alright, so the last thing to do really is to add a grid work of 20mm holes, and I really wanted to do my own drilling guide using a shelf pin jig to get the precise 32mm spacing, and I was going to create my own drill guide sticks to get the spacing of the holes correct, and then use these drill guides from Lee Valley along with a big drill bit. But things weren't as precise as I wanted, probably because of the MDF that I was using. The drill bit was kind of wearing on it, and I wasn't getting as precise spacing as I needed, which is really the whole point of having the grid work. So instead of doing that, I decided to just buy the Parf guide system, which is what you see here, and which is what I'll be using to drill the holes. So I'll just kind of dive right into that. The Parf guide system is essentially a precision layout and drilling jig. There are two parts to the system. The Parf sticks, which you see me laying out, rely on the Pythagorean theorem to yield a perfectly square grid work of 3mm holes. The first row of holes is drilled using the Parf stick, then the first column is drilled. This first column is known to be square to the first row because of the 3-4-5 triangle rule, and in this case it's the 6-8-10. The 6th hole of the row and the 8th hole of the column are joined, leaving a perfectly square setup. Once the left and right columns are drilled, those columns can be connected to drill the remaining rows. This stage of the process is where my shop-made jig showed its inaccuracy. I couldn't get the sticks to always line up perfectly. In this case, the Parf sticks always line up with the previously drilled holes, and there's nothing to worry about. With all of the 3mm holes drilled, I moved to the second part of the system, which allows me to turn the 3mm holes into 20mm holes, which is the most widely used diameter for this type of workstation. I considered 3/4 inch holes, but figured there were many more options for dogs and other accessories in the 20mm ecosystem. The orange drilling jig has a series of precision drilled holes. Initially, 3mm pins are used to align the jig perfectly, then a 20mm Forstner bit with a 3mm spur can drill its hole. The setup is repeated until the 3mm pins can no longer find a home. Once this happens, the Forstner bit is bumped over to the next hole and 20mm dogs are used as the alignment aid. This is repeated until all of the holes are drilled. It is not necessary to drill all the holes though. The instructions even suggest not drilling them all because 3mm holes are needed in case one wants to add any offset hole setups. I drilled them all just to see how the system worked, and when I make a larger table, I'll make a more in-depth video discussing the Parf guide system. Alright, that's all I have for this one. I'm pretty excited about how this little table turned out. Like I said, it's a dry run prototype for a larger version I hope to build in the next few months as I find the time and money. But this is going to see a lot of use in the coming weeks as I have two big projects coming up. One is a large desk build, the other is a large TV console cabinet and side tower cabinet. And this is going to kind of act as a staging area or a parts cart for different parts I'm milling that I can kind of keep separate from the chaos that will be the inside of this shop. So the versatility of this cart will be seen hopefully soon in the next few videos. The T-track in the aluminum is pretty cool. You have access on either end, so this side you have access, this side you have access, and likewise on the other two pieces. As opposed to keeping this end piece in front here, you would have lost access to here and you would have had to figure out some other mechanism to get a clamp in there. The MDF top is going to be pretty useful, especially when I make a larger one. I'm not going to use this 20mm grid work for track saw cuts. That was more of a dry run just to kind of use the Parf guide system and figure out what it would look like. This is also going to be useful for small glue ups, little panels. Anything that can kind of fit on this table will be useful. And obviously this bottom shelf will start to collect as much clutter as possible because that's what shelves do. So anyways, if you guys have any comments or suggestions on extruded aluminum or MFT style tops, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.